I don't know. I'm still on the stairs.
Without a doubt, I am a sucker for a monster movie. Like, I just love them. No matter what kind of mood I'm in, if I see an intriguing monster movie, I'm gonna watch it. Now, that said, weirdly enough, I almost watched this movie a few weeks ago, and for reasons I don't remember, I just didn't. But when I came across this the other day, I just had to jump in, and I'm mostly glad that I did. The Tank is a 2023 movie about a family that inherits a piece of property that contains a water tank with some mysterious creature in it. Now, for me, this movie did a lot of things that I really liked. Now, I did feel like it started to run out of ideas kind of later on in the movie, and it began to do things that it felt like it was supposed to do, as opposed to what was best for the story or the characters involved. Now, the movie itself starts out in 1946 with a flashback of a family that gets attacked by this mysterious creature that lives in a water tank in a remote house in the woods of the Pacific Northwest. We then flash forward to 1978, and we meet our main protagonist couple, Jules and Ben, who run a small pet store, or at least try to run the pet store. They're struggling right now to make ends meet and keeping themselves above water as well as the business, at the same time trying to raise their daughter. Now, that's when a lawyer from Ben's mom's estate comes knocking. Now, Ben's father was the one that died long ago in that flashback, and his mom has been in and out of mental hospitals ever since. She had passed away several months earlier, and now this piece of property that no one seemed to know about now falls down to Ben. Now, given this family's financial trouble, this could be something that could really get them out of a jam. And so they decided to take the weekend, go down to the property, and see what kind of shape it's in. Now, that's the basic setup of the film. And right out of the gate, I want to talk a little bit about some of the things I really appreciated. Now, the first is the characters, actors, and dialogue. Now, there really is a good mix of grounded dialogue and earnest performances from the two lead actors that immediately made these characters feel three-dimensional. Now, of course, at this point, it's early in the film, so anything can kind of happen after that, but introducing characters and getting off on the right foot can be tricky sometimes. In the opening scene, for instance, there is this kind of chaos in the pet store, and they're all kind of working together, wrangling all these animals, as the camera's kind of just zipping around. And it really gave some energy into the beginning of this movie and allowed there to be a good mix of both expository information as well as some dialogue that gets you to know who these people are. Now, as an overarching thing, I thought one of the strongest elements of this movie is its use of characters and interactions. Now, the second thing I really liked about this was the setting of the 1970s. Now, I really wish more horror movies would set themselves in the 70s. Like, the aesthetics of the 70s in general was just born for horror, with the grounded and kind of muted earth tones that everyone wore and decorated, and the character attributes of sort of this rebelliousness and kind of breaking out of the social norms and this thinking out of the box kind of atmosphere. It just allows for a nice mix of character traits. For me, it's so much better than with all the 80s stuff that's kind of coming out now, where everything is kind of just so garish and loud colors, characters, and production design, just all trying to tap into that over-the-top consumerism that kind of defined the era of the 80s. To me, the 70s style just feels more like a warm bath that just kind of lulls you into the story. Anyway, the couple head up to this remote house, and they find that it is in rough shape, to put it mildly. But its surrounding land may be worth a fortune, pulling them out of the pickle that they're in. It also has this mysterious water tank that, once they disturb it by turning it on, begins to emit these strange noises at night. They then set about to try and clean the house as best as possible in order to figure out what they actually have here. Now, this is where I thought the movie shined the brightest for me. Like, sure, it's a little slow moving for a quintessential monster movie, but I'm just always a fan of slower moving films that have nice character work, and this one does that. It really took its time during the cleaning of the house and subsequent mysteries that kind of pop up. I really felt like I got to know this couple, and one of the things that really stood out to me as a positive. Like normally, when there's a couple in a horror movie, it's generally one of them is the smart and curious one, and the other one is oblivious and just kind of stands around, not believing anything, not doing anything, and just letting the other one do all the work. One of the refreshing things that I really liked about this movie is I felt that both characters worked together to figure things out. And at different times, each kind of had their own things that they had to handle and were handled, well, somewhat intelligently. So no matter which character was on screen, it felt like I was watching the protagonist of the movie as opposed to just watching an also person waiting to get back to the main person to move the plot forward. Now, that may sound like a simple concept, but it really isn't, and not a lot of things do that. Also, I have to mention, the chemistry between these two leads felt really genuine. Like, I could totally understand these two people being married. They really seem to complement each other and work well together. Like, sometimes movies just go with the idea of just sticking two hot people together as a couple, and okay, that'll just be fine. But it's not that easy. I mean, chemistry is important for a reason. And I think this couple really had good on-screen chemistry. Now, getting back to the story, of course, as they start cleaning, these mysterious sounds get more and more intense, leading them to discuss something living inside this water tank and having to deal with it in some way. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into the specific plot details here because I think, this is where the movie takes a little bit of a step back for me. It's not bad by any stretch, but it does start setting these characters on paths that I felt were a little more like they just needed to have these set pieces in a monster movie versus what made sense in the story. Like, there are several plans that felt like a little too convoluted, like one where they decide to go down to the tank in order to distract it in order to get away. But none of the actions felt like they actually needed to do it. And it turned out to be a little useless anyway, where you honestly could have cut out that entire sequence and it wouldn't have really mattered. Also, it was a little disappointing because they do this really nice setup of having these characters who run a pet store to have a lot of knowledge of animals and behavior. And yet, other than like a few little comments, they don't really use that knowledge in any real way. Like, the things they end up actually doing kind of would have been done by anyone without their special education. And so that was a little bit of a letdown. And so that said, it just felt like some of the character decisions didn't make a whole lot of sense to me given their backstory. But overall, the movie does sort of work itself out in the end, and I thought it was an enjoyable little monster movie. It looked good, aside from the very beginning flashback where there was this extreme blue filter, which I did not like, but thankfully that was only in the cold open. But it was acted really well, and I have to mention the creature effects that were all practical and looks really good for the most part. A lot of the kills kind of defaulted to the quick-cutting shaky camera stuff, which isn't my favorite, but, it's effective for what it is and what it needs to show. I just really liked the first half of this film so much and would have preferred it to stay kind of slightly more character-driven and kept it a bit more cerebral. But I also know that doesn't really sell tickets to a monster movie. Instead, the second half kind of descends into a roughly standard monster movie tropes, but still an enjoyable watch. I'd give it a B. But let me know what you think.